Hey guys, it's towniesimbuilds here, and welcome back to another speed build. Now, unfortunately, as many of you may know, October has been a really wild and crazy month for me, so unfortunately, there was not a lot of spooky content I could create for you guys prior to Halloween. But of course, here we are, we do have a speed build, and if you guys were able to join me on stream, we did create a paranormal library. Now, this has been on my bucket list for quite some time. There was actually an earlier version I was doing off stream that was also in the world of Glimmerbrook. But I thought, let me give this one more go. I was kind of on the right track with the previous version, but I wasn't really feeling it as much. But of course, here we are. We are on a 20 by 30 lot, if I'm not mistaken. And overall, I wanted this build to fit somewhat closely to the New England aesthetic. We have a lot of older Victorian colonial homes, if you will, that kind of match this vibe. So fitting with the theme, you guys. I did use a lot of the cats and dogs pack. So we have like the weathered blue shingles. I will introduce a lot of the doors and windows from that pack as well. But of course, we need to give this a spooky edge. So what better than the vampires pack? So I do believe I use the columns, the railings, and also the wall trims. I think they may also be known as friezes in this case. But overall, I was really enjoying this build. I really liked the lighting in Glimmerbrook, which is a really weird thing to say. I will say that Glimmerbrook does not always have the most appealing lighting, but somehow in this build, it just came together here. Also bringing in a lot of trees. I love the trees from cats and dogs, which do feel very autumnal to me. I feel like it was really hard finding good matches for this build, but thankfully we did have these options, and I do place them throughout. For some reason, I like the trees a little bit more on the decaying side, so I think it was fairly fitting. We're also pulling in a lot of the I believe it's a rose bush, a lot of the rose bushes and the little brambly bits from the vampires pack. So more of that kind of semi-alive, semi-dying feel, if you will, with a lot of the landscaping. And also pulling in more debug as well. These pieces remind me more so of like weeds that you might see or like seagrass at a beach. But of course, courtesy of the cats and dogs pack. Bringing in that vampires fencing as well. And now I'm currently working on the landscaping. Now, if you guys were on stream, I struggled with the front portion of this yard. I couldn't figure out the pathways. Everything was looking quite weird and questionable in shape. But eventually, I think it came together in the end. Once more debug there. And now, the towers. The towers are probably my favorite part of the build. I will say that I accidentally sort of modeled this after the artist house in Florida. So if you guys have watched my Real Lore series, it was the very first episode, and it was discussing the tale of Robert the Doll. But the house does have a similar structure. I think aesthetically and in terms of landscaping, it is quite different, but you can see that there is a striking similarity, which is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing considering the theme of this build. Now, of course, I did want this to be a little bit more distressed and overgrown, so I'm pulling a lot of the ivy pieces from the vampires pack, and also utilizing these awnings from the cats and dogs pack as well. Now, unfortunately, I would normally use Get Together in a community lot build, but in this case, I did not. So, of course, the ivy pieces from vampires took its place. Anyways, you guys, going back to the towers will be likely one of my favorite parts of this build. There are many parts that I really enjoy in this build, though, which made it very difficult to edit. I think originally this video was closer to about half an hour, but I was thinking, you know what? I think I can shrink this a little bit more. I don't want this to go on too long. And so here we are. At this point, I figured out the front yard. I did place a fountain, benches, and a little chess table there. But of course, we're seeing the inside take shape. I did plan for a basement. And I will say the basement is a vibe of its own. It exists on a different plane entirely. Not in the sense that it is fantastical, but it is quite different from the library itself. But I think it'll be a really nice surprise, especially for anybody who downloads this off the gallery and has not seen this video. But anyways, we're working on the inside of the library. I will say that this first floor is much more conventional. This definitely feels more so like an old historic home that has been preserved and then converted into a local library. So it definitely carries a older aesthetic. It seems vaguely colonial, vaguely nautical even. So we're going to see lots of cats and dogs here. So from the curtains to the wallpaper, the rug, the chairs, the paintings, lots of cats and dogs content. I will say that there are a lot of fairly, I don't know if I would say popular, but there have been a lot of stories in terms of ghost stories that are connected to New England, and also paranormal investigation groups also tied to New England or areas close to it. So I think stylistically this was the right choice. You guys did see the little living room parlor take shape, if you will, with the fireplace there. And now I'm just working on a small computer area over here. Now, I will say, there are other areas to this build that will go a little bit more in depth. I would say that the first floor is a floor that is more accessible to the general public. So, if you are a true psychic, a true medium, a paranormal investigator, anything of that sort, anything more tied to paranormal studies, if you will, or the occult, there are very specific places in this build where your Sims can go to and also utilize. The towers themselves will all house essentially the summoning table? I think it's something like that. The table from the paranormal stuff pack. All of the towers will house those. Technically, there's only 2 towers. So the 2 towers house some outside. So if you want to perform a seance, your Sims can do so. There's 1 location in the front and 1 location in the back. And there is 1 more on the 2nd floor. Anyways, at this point, we are working on the hallway. And of course, because this is a library, I did want some semblance of a librarian's front desk. So this is my creation here. I'm kind of putting together this fake L-shaped desk, which I'm actually quite proud of. I think the wood tones did match fairly well. And it was a really tight space, but I think it just squeezed in there. I think your Sims can still pass by. And of course, we do have that little bit of bulletin board signage from the Get to Work pack. I didn't say that they would be criminals. I think that board is mainly for criminals, but perhaps there could be notices of hauntings or pictures of ghost hunters or paranormal investigators that you could contact. That is my reasoning there. So kind of appropriating the objects just a little bit. But like I mentioned, there are outside areas to perform seances. This is one of them, just utilizing the Paranormal Pack's seance table, and then bringing in some base game candles and the plants also from the Paranormal Stuff Pack. Now, of course, you don't have to be involved in ghostly activities. We do also have some sitting areas as well. So, of course, bringing in more of the lovely objects, from the Cats and Dogs pack, with a lot of the benches, chairs, and also the... what's the word? The ship steering wheels? I think there's a name for that. I totally forgot what it is. Anyways, we are moving to the 2nd floor. The 2nd floor is definitely where things get a little bit more serious. We do have the offices of the paranormal investigators, and these will look a little bit more like mini cubicles, if you will, but of course without any of the dividers. So we would have a lot of research here, data being kept. We do have the official seance room. So this room is actually closed off. The curtains are shut. We do have cameras eventually that will be here. So we're really studying paranormal activity to the highest extent. So if we have professional mediums coming in, for example, they would come into this room. There is also a viewing window. So if your Sims want to see the activities but want to be kept safe, we do have that as well. Now, with all of these special rooms, for the most part, I did place in protective items. So we do have the small totems from the Paranormal Stuff Pack as the method of protection there. And of course, we do have the salt circle. Over here, I'm just finessing a lot of the hallway here. I did add in the get to work double door. I think it's called a French door, if you will. And I did also include the windows as well. Those windows I would normally use for some kind of bistro or a small store, but I think they worked really well there for the offices. Of course, blinds are closed. It's a top secret study, if you will, but you can peek through potentially to see what's going on inside. Now, this part of the library I imagine to be also accessible to the public. Of course, we do have some interesting oddities, though. This was vaguely inspired by Ed and Lorraine Warren. They do also have a museum of the occult. However, it is very dangerous. A lot of the items are deemed to be cursed or housing malevolent spirits. So in spirit of that, we do have a display case that you guys did see. So we have some haunted dolls, creepy hands, and possible antiques that may have some unsettling energy tied to them. Anyways, you are currently seeing the seance room come to life. Actually, you know what? This is not a seance room. My apologies. This is the channeling room. So I imagine this room is where one would come to potentially talk to spirits, but more so channel them, if you will. So I believe you would use a medium. A person who is a medium would be sort of like the method of communication to spirits. They would be writing down potential messages. We do have an easel as well that could help convey pictures or illustrations of what could be described from different spirits or ghosts, if you will. So it works a little bit differently than the seance room itself. I feel like the seance room is more of Sims getting together and just trying to connect with different spirits, where this room would be a little bit more specific, I would say. A little bit more intimate, if you will. Now, of course, this room still needed some protection, so I do add some dream catchers along the wall. I think there is also the helping hand in there as well. I'm watching this, but of course it's speeding by, so I can't recall the items off the top of my head. But of course, with the balconies, I'm just using a lot of the same outdoor furniture, and I also place in a telescope. Anyways, we now move on to the basement. And the basement was a lot of fun. I definitely wanted to have the basement resemble some sort of a secret lab. This would definitely be off limits to most of the patrons entering the library. So just regular folk entering in, this area would be restricted access per se. And we do have some very interesting rooms in here as well. Now, just for the sake of having a full facility, I did include a little bathroom over here, using most of the objects from Get to Work. So keeping that very sort of metal, sterile environment, very much like a lab. I don't know if you have to wash off some ectoplasm, so there's that. There's a shower for that. And of course, sticking in that same aesthetic, the kitchen is also very metallic and very sterile as well. So think of a science facility, think of a hospital, if you will, something of that sort. But, you know, in the event your Sims get hungry, you know, they're researching ghost stories and they need a snack, they can sneak down here and access the kitchenette. It is possible. Now, you guys will see that there are two closed rooms over there, and I honestly had a lot of fun designing them. I wasn't really sure what to do here originally. I did know that I wanted some kind of storage unit. Just like in The Sims 3, you can collect spirits and also store them as well. So I tried to recreate that here. We do have the Spectre jars. I would say that I wish the jars were more industrial looking versus being more antique, Victorian. But I think they still did the trick here. Of course, I'm also bringing in more objects from the Get to Work pack, some computer stations. There's a lot of there's quite an assortment of other objects as well that could indicate different chemicals. Not sure what you do with them. I would say they could be used for developing film. They could be batteries for some of the equipment. I'll let you use your imagination with that. All right, this is probably one of my favorite rooms in this build, and we do have a potential possessed doll here. All right, so we do have cameras everywhere. We do have chairs for someone to spectate or take notes. And of course, it is in a ring of salt. Now, carefully using the keys on my keyboard, I did lift up certain objects, so it does appear that the doll has supernatural abilities with the toys kind of lifting off the ground. It's definitely a not so safe place to be in, but if you are a brave soul, you may approach the doll. All right. We do have this room as well. I consider this to be more of a sleep study room. If you're experiencing perhaps odd dreams or seeing dark entities in your sleep, this may be a place to go. Is it the comfiest room? Certainly not. But it is fully equipped and you would be monitored at all times in case anything occurred. I did think a lot of these drawings were also very fitting here. I imagine that one who is experiencing these troubles in their sleep may also record their dreams, so those sketches could be just that. We do have a little storage unit here. We do have an X-ray image, which I imagine to be more so perhaps alleged photography of spirits or spectral energies, more so than broken bones. Of course, you know, you guys, we got to get creative. We don't have everything we need in this game, but creativity can go a long way. With that said, we also have a cemetery out back, which I think is fairly fitting. We are, of course, investigating spirits and ghosts, so the closer the living is to the dead, the better, I'd say. But of course, just patting it in here, I'm using a lot of the gravestones from the Vampires pack. I do also eventually add in some gravestones for cats and dogs as well. So those will appear more to the left side of the backyard. And of course, just making the grave sites more intentional, just using some base game flowers there. Oh, and here they are, bringing in the tombstones from the Cats and Dogs pack. So honestly, you guys, I am excited for the Life and Death pack. I would like to see how cemeteries will work, what level of customization we'll have in them. But for the time being, this is just debug. So if you guys do get the pack, feel free to go back and customize this accordingly. Now, as a final element to this build, I did create an attic. So this is the top of the tower, facing the front yard of the build itself. And honestly, this was just a little crawl space. There are a lot of different boxes, crates. I will also add in some distress and also some secret occult objects as well. Now, I will say that there is also another secret spot up here. I will let you discover that yourself, but if you want a little bit more privacy to continue your spiritual activities, there is a place to do just that. Alright guys, and that's a wrap on the Paranormal Library in the world of Glimmerbrook. Now, thankfully, we will be extending spooky season into November, but of course, if you do celebrate it, happy Halloween. I hope if you do download this lot, that you really enjoy using it in your game as well. Of course, this is still a no CC, no mod, limited pack build that will be available on the Sims 4 gallery. With that said, I will leave you guys with the final lot specs and the final cinematic shots. And of course, just like always, this has been 𝗧𝗛𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗛𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏